When you think of great heroes of Africa, you might think of leaders like Nelson Mandela, Kwame Nkrumah, or Patrice Lumumba. What they all had was a common similarity in their communication, freedom, and Fela Kuti was no different. Fela Kuti was not in any sense a conventional leader. Rather, he was a musician who was arrested over 200 times for the charges of drug trafficking, currency smuggling, and even murder, for using his music as a voice to fight against the government. What was his motive for doing it, and how did he become influential? Olusegun Olufela Oludotun Ransom Kuti was born on the 15th of October 1938. His father, Reverend Israel Oludotun Ransom Kuti, was an Anglican minister and school principal. He was the first president of the Nigerian Union of Teachers. His mother, Fumilayo Ransom Kuti, was a feminist activist in the anti-colonial movement with Kwame Nkrumah. She was a strong advocate who fought hard for women's right to vote. Fela Kuti was a child prodigy. He started playing the piano and drums as early as 8 years old at his father's school, and he led the school choir. At the age of 17, his father died of cancer. Then in 1958, his mother sent him to London to study medicine, where he changed his mind a few weeks after he landed in London and decided to study music instead. He enrolled at the Trinity College of London to study classical music. He would spend most of his time practicing alongside his friends, but he wasn't interested in classical music. His interest was to play jazz, so he would go out and listen to jazz. After spending a year in Trinity College, he formed his first band, Fela Kuti and his High Life Rockers, which recorded 4 tracks for the Melodies label, one of Britain's first independent African and Caribbean music label. He later then formed the band Kalakuta with West African and Caribbean musicians. They played a mixture of high life and jazz. The group was one of London's most popular R&B bands. Fela went back to Nigeria in 1963 and forms the first edition of the Fela Ransom Kuti Quintet. He trained as a radio performer for the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation and was hired as a junior producer, but it wasn't for so long as he missed singing in front of live audience. He resigned from his job and formed the jazz band, retaining his former band name, Kalakuta. He was introduced to Tony Allen, a drummer, who on the other hand loved playing jazz. It was like a match made in heaven. For the first 2 years, they played small band jazz that sounded like blues, and Nigerians weren't resonating with the sound. They loved high life because it was danceable. Then he knew he needed his music to be danceable. So he created the second edition of Kalakuta named Nigerian 70, bringing on a trumpeter to the band. What we now know as Afrobeat emerged from this group experiment. Their first experiment was to mix Nigerian highlife and jazz to create his first hit, Laisha, but it wasn't for so long, as the Nigerian Biafra war would reshape the country's interests. This is a good spot in the story to tell you about the context of the war. In the year 1959, some huge deposit of oil was found in this part of Nigeria. It was the first in the continent. The economy started rapidly growing, and it felt like a miracle. Shortly, Nigeria gained her independence, mainly spearheaded by Fumilayo Ransom Kuti and George Awajukwu. Because of the oil boom, billions of dollars of oil money started flowing into the country, which led to a rise in corruption. But later on, a group of incidents made this region feel the need to marginalize. Then in 1966, a group of military commandants, mainly from this region, led the first coup, and 7 months later, the counter-coup happened. The following year came the Civil War. On his tour to US, he met Sandra Smith. She was a partisan of the Black Panther Party. The first time Sandra heard Fela rehearsing, she was intrigued and wanted to know what his music was all about. Because he was singing in Yoruba, so he asked him,
"What was he singing about?" And he was so proud to tell me he was singing about his soup.
She was mad at Fela's response because at that particular time there was wakefulness going on around the black community in America, and the blacks were just finding that. But Fela was nonchalant about it, saying that the Black Power movement does not draw inspiration from Africa.
The Africans taught the Europeans everything that they know today. I said, talking shit, you know. I said, there are books.
Get this. Here's the knowledge right here in this book.
A book written by author Michael Vale described what Sandra meant to Fela. She was the one who opened my eyes. After he and his band had spent 10 months in America, the Immigration and Naturalization Service was tipped off by a promoter that Kuti and his band were in US without work permits. When he came back, the Civil War had finished. Amidst the current problem in the country, Fela moved his Afro spots to a larger premises in Surulere, where he later named Kalakuta. The space would comfortably accommodate 1,000 people. He changed his lyrical theme from love to social issues and turned the Kalakuta to a communion and a recording studio, which he declared independent from the Nigerian state. He would hold sessions of consciousness raising and word sound ritual with himself as chief priest, which was conducted at his nightclub. The police would raid the Kalakuta and arrest Fela on several occasions on charges of drug dealing, on which he tells the story on the album Alagon Clothes and Expensive Shirts.
50 cops at my door and Igbo can get me 10 years.
He also changed his name from Ransom Kuti to Anikulapo, one who carries death in his pouch. Fela began to run political columns on daily and weekly newspapers like Punch and Daily Times, bypassing editorial censorship, predominantly state-controlled media, under the title Chief Priest Say. At this period, the country had yet experienced another coup. Yakubu Gowon, the head of state, reiterated an early pledge to ensure that the military rule would be terminated on the 1st of October 1976. In 1974, however, he postponed democratization, explaining that Nigerians had not yet demonstrated moderation and self-control in pursuing sectional ends. While Yakubu Gowon was attending an OAU summit in Kampala, he was informed that he was no longer the head of state. It was an announcement that was made by his own ally, and that made Murtala Mohammed the new head of state. Just about 198 days as the head of state, he was murdered in a traffic jam by a failed coup plot, spearheaded by a guy that also helped plan the counter-coup, leaving the deputy, Obasanjo, in power. Obasanjo's first action was to deploy soldiers everywhere. He also gave the soldiers the go-ahead order to start the Operation Go Slow, but the soldiers wouldn't fail to treat the drivers like dogs. If a driver made the wrong turn, they would stop the car, open the door, pull him out and whip him. Seeing how the soldiers were obeying the military commandants without any justification, Fela had gotten every reason to attack the government. In 1977, he and African 70 released the album Zombie, using the zombie metaphor to describe the methods of the Nigerian military.
Zombie! You know, like then.
The album was made up of 4 tracks in total: Zombie, Minister, Follow Follow, which was the original LP, and Observation is No Crime, Mistake as a bonus track. The album was a voice out on the atrocities around the country, and it was a hit. The government reacted. 1,000 soldiers with the sitting head of state Olusegun Obasanjo being present at the scene raided Kalakuta. Fela was stripped naked and was severely beaten. His elderly mom was thrown down from a window. His Kalakuta was burned down, and so with his master tapes. The government then framed him a kidnapper for allegedly adopting 27 women, whom were his dancers, composers, and singers, which he responded by marrying all of them. Amid the chaos, his mom dies as a result of the Kalakuta incident after spending months in the hospital. Fela carries his mother's coffin to Obasanjo's residence and wrote 2 songs, Coffin for the Head of State and Unknown Soldier, referencing the official inquiry that claims that an unknown soldier had destroyed the communion. The first parliamentary election since 1964 was announced to commence the following year, and Fela wanted a piece of it. He formed a political party which he called Movement of the People, which became inactive as he couldn't finance the campaign. During this time, he was arrested over multiple times. On the 11th of August 1979, the first democratic election took place to elect Shehu Shagari as the first elected president of Nigeria, but his reign was short-lived. Nigeria at the moment was in shambles. In 1982, the oil price plummeted. 90% of their revenue came from oil. Numerous government projects were abandoned and unemployment surged. Teachers and civil servants were unpaid, but among the elites, the scramble for enrichment continued, leading to Shagari expelling over 200 million foreign workers, mainly from Ghana and Cameroon. After the country had gone on a downward spiral in his first tenure, there were indications that he manipulated the second election result to his favor. This provided the soldiers with an excuse to intervene. On the New Year's Eve of 1983, Nigeria woke up to learn that the Second Republic has been replaced by a military junta. According to General Babangida, the coup was coordinated by Major General Muhammadu Buhari with his other officers of the Nigerian military, which was successful as he became the head of state. Buhari's regime restricted freedom of press and suppressed criticism of the government. He launched a war against indiscipline. He argued that without discipline, Nigeria degenerates and will become a jungle where respect for law and order is disregarded. His military officials will arrive at the gate of government offices very early and punishes civilians that came late to work irrespective of age or office position. Fela quickly became a vocal opponent, criticizing Muhammadu Buhari with his song, Beast of No Nation, referring him as an animal in a man's body. The government reaction was jailing him on a charge of currency smuggling without any evidence on him. Amnesty International and others denounced the charges as politically motivated. Amnesty designated him a prisoner of conscience, and other human rights groups also took up his case. After 20 months, General Ibrahim Babangida released him from prison, the longest he was in prison. On the 21st January 1993, he and 4 members of African 70 were arrested and were later charged on the 25th of January for the murder of an electrician. The charges were dismissed in court. Fela Kuti died as an AIDS denialist. The day of his funeral, about 1 million people showed up. From 1939 to 1997, what happened between his dash became an inspiration to the world. Fela Kuti is remembered as an influential icon who voiced his opinion on matters that affected the nation. The Celebration Festival is held each year at the New Fela Shrine to celebrate the life of the legend and icon, reviving his musical influence.